Is there even anything that really needs to be said about Ticuu's Divination, or Battle Harmony for that matter? Like, anything that I haven't said yet. Anything. Anything at all. At this point, everyone playing the game already knows what they are. Ticuu is a Grandmaster Wrecking Ball. It's a solar trebuchet, known for aggressively lobbing miniature priming arrows that track targets, which are almost always followed up by a flaming rod of light that acts as a detonator. Battle Harmony is the king of super regen, only rivaled by Bad Juju and Nezarec Sin, and even then, just barely. In a nutshell, one makes your blow-ups blow up more, and the other siphons that energy and doubles your charge rate. Explosive Explosions does sound enticing, and even though the thought of that does give me a slight erection, that doesn't necessarily translate to the perfect build weapon. Everything has some sort of drawback, including this bow. Pardon the pun. The thing about Ticuu's Divination is that if you really want to get the most out of it, you need to build around it. You don't just whip it out and start having a blast. On second thought, technically you do, but you get what I mean. You're gonna want that catalyst too. I'll talk a bit about how that works in just a minute, but for now, let's take a look at the build in question here. Skill trees only take a second this time, so let's look at that. If you really want to emphasize on the big booms, you should go with the bottom tree for Igniting Touch and the Dawnblade modifiers, but in honesty, none of that really matters here because the weapon and the mods that we're using are what hold everything together. Igniting Touch is a melee command. It deals a burn dot that eventually turns into a delayed explosion. It's awesome and I love it. So if you're leaning into the solar splash damage, which you should be, it's a good ability to have. Dawnblade modifiers are nice and all, but both bottom and top tree are still going to do what we need them to do regardless, so just pick your poison and commit to it. Now that we're past that, let's start with mods. Reason being is because everything needs a centerpiece, and I know just what mods to grab. I wasn't joking about the explosive explosions earlier. That is the centerpiece, that right there, and that means before anything else, we need Wrath of Rasputin. This mod gives solar splash kills a chance to create a Warmind cell, and Ticuu's only real function is exactly that, solar splash damage. So these two go hand in hand like a newlywed couple riding each other in Vegas. However, that mod also needs a few supplements. Global Reach is a must-have. That increases the AoE radius for both damage and status effects for every Warmind cell that you spawn. Next up is Burning Cells. That adds a burn dot to the detonation of any and all Warmind cells. And lastly, after everything else is said and done, you can take Power of Rasputin for that sweet cherry on top of this explosive cake. For those of you who don't have it or you just don't know, Power of Rasputin acts as a damage buff for all of your weapons against any targets within a certain distance of any Warmind cells you've spawned. Hence, Global Reach. Now when a cell is on the ground, you'll hit anything near it for yellow numbers and crits. The goal here is to maximize Ticuu's damage values, which were already straight disgusting to begin with. And you guys know me. I play Destiny. Disgusting is what I surround myself with. If it doesn't make me want to vomit, then I don't want it. Now, in theory, this in and of itself would be considered a build, quote unquote, but still it goes even deeper than that because there are more mods that can drastically change the way that this build functions, while simultaneously altering your combat style. 4 of them, to be specific: the Grasp of the Warmind, Cellular Suppression, Warmind's Protection, and Warmind's Longevity. I'll elaborate a bit more on those in the combat section of this video, but for now just know that all 4 of those mods are void and they're all interchangeable. You don't have to move anything around to make space. You could swap on the fly if you really wanted to. For the sake of this video, I've gone with Grasp of Rasputin and Power of Rasputin. It fits my zoom and boom style of combat rather well. Let's take a look at Ticuu's catalyst just for a minute. That thing's a game changer. Everybody knows how this works. Tracking arrows fire from the hip, detonators fire from the sights. Perfectly drawn arrows that hit for crits increase detonation damage. It's not rocket science. The catalyst, however, makes a few adjustments here and there. As you can see on screen, perfectly drawn detonators get a damage buff. Only if it's detonating a burning target though. Again, this leans into that whole solar splash thing that I was talking about earlier. So there's the first damage stack, not counting Power of Rasputin or Absorption Cells, which at the moment can stack on just about anything. I don't expect that to be a thing for long though, so enjoy it while you can. Lastly, hitting targets unaffected by Sacred Flames will refresh the duration of any targets that currently are afflicted by it. Causality Arrows is the damage buff from the exotic perk, and it stacks on itself 6 times. Hitting a target that's not burning will reset the duration of said damage buff. These abilities make this bow significantly more of a threat to anything in your line of sights, be it a boss, a crowd of mobs, or if you eat tumors for breakfast, another player. You absolutely need to have this catalyst. It is the single most crucial thing here. Next, for anyone that's new to the game, we gotta take a look at Battle Harmony, again, which I seem to do on a weekly basis at this point. Shut up, I'll get to you later. Now, that's not a complaint, it's just that it's starting to become a sleep paralysis demon for me at this point, and I'm looking forward to when this Battle Harmony series comes to a close. Maybe I'll get a good night's sleep then. Anyway, here's how it works. Kill an enemy with an elemental weapon that matches your subclass, and you get a few seconds of increased super regen, but that buff can't stack on itself. Once your super is full, matching elemental kills proc a damage buff called Absorption Cells. It stacks on a timer that can be refreshed, but it only buffs damage from matching elemental weapons. Again, for the third time in 3 weeks, Arc with Arc, Solar with Solar, and Void with Void. I don't care about stasis right now. There's only one weapon and it's not worth the oxygen I'd waste by saying its name anyway. Fortunately, there are no weapon recommendations this time around, which is a good thing. That saves me about 2.5 minutes of my time. The entire focus here is on Ticuu and the Warmind cells. On top of that, anything I recommend is inevitably going to chap somebody's ass, so there's not much point in suggesting weapons. Excluding solar rockets for splash damage. Code Duello is incredible right now, that and Eyes of Tomorrow. Both are extremely solid picks because of their overall damage values and the matching elements, though I can imagine not many people have the Raid Rocket just yet, so Code Duello is definitely a good one to have, especially with Chain Reaction or Cluster Bomb, one or the other. As I say literally every single time, it's not the only one that you can take, it's just the one that I enjoy the most, so don't yell at me for it. If you build into splash damage, you will get splash damage, so lean into it like you can't stand up straight. The entire idea here is to give everything, and I do mean everything, a chance at spawning a Warmind cell, including the cells themselves. They can also generate more cells from detonations, if that's your thing. Everything is about the splash damage. You've got Ticuu, Code Duello, whatever solar grenade you're using, Igniting Touch, assuming it kills. Literally everything is set up to explode and potentially drop a cell. Those cells are going to give chunks of super energy when you finally get around to detonating them, assuming you didn't just detonate everything with Ticuu's Divination to begin with. Those super chunks are going to stack on Battle Harmony, and all of it just kind of snowballs. Your charge is extremely fast, even at lower intellect tiers, and as of right now, it would appear that Battle Harmony's damage buff can stack on literally just about anything. I have no idea if that's a bug or a feature, but I expect it to be nerfed in the near future because this is extremely lethal and violently fluid. As for the extra mods that I mentioned earlier, you've got a couple choices here. For starters, we're looking at Grasp of the Warmind. This allows you to grab any cells on the ground and throw them. It can only be done once, but still, regardless, this turns any and all cells into damage buffs that you can position to your liking. It functions in a circular fashion. Warmind cells buff damage, solar splash kills spawn more Warmind cells, rinse and repeat. This makes for an extremely interesting combat style, one where you are directly in control of when and where your damage buff goes. You could also swap Grasp of the Warmind for Cellular Suppression. Anything in the vicinity of a detonation of a Warmind cell will take Void Suppression damage, which stifles ability regen on targets and temporarily dazes them, leaving them wide open for an attack. Be it a single target or a crowd of mobs, it is going to burn. This is the defensive way to play. Assuming it doesn't blow everything around you to tiny pieces, it'll stun everything in the detonation radius every time you deal damage to it. That can be used as an element of control, and it functions rather well, I might add. If you're feeling real frisky, you could take Warmind's Protection instead. At that point, targets near Warmind cells deal much less damage to the player. That's another defensive strategy. You get both a damage buff to anything near any Warmind cells you spawned, on top of a damage reduction from any targets near said cells. Or, if you're all about that damage, Warmind's Longevity. This doubles the length of time that a cell is on the ground and active, so it's great for damage stacking, assuming you're using Power of Rasputin. All of these are wise choices, but ultimately it really comes down to what you as a player really want to emphasize on. And that's not even all of them. There's an entire collection of Arc Warmind mods, and even some that encourage team play by providing healing, like Fire Team Medic. At the end of the day, Ticuu's Divination with its Catalyst is an incredible asset to any Solar Splash loadout, but even more so with Warmind cells, especially when your damage increases from multiple different sources. Because of that, and the mods that we've slotted here together, this gives Ticuu's Divination the potential to chunk, and I mean that literally. All you need is a few mods and this quickly turns into one of the highest DPS bows I have seen in this game thus far. Much like its sister bow, Trinity Ghoul. I cannot recommend this enough. That about sums up all of this build. Next up, we're going to be tackling some experimental Voidwalker builds using Battle Harmony as well, since the list of things that I need to try out with it is getting larger and larger by the the day, which was not the plan, by the way. You guys know the drill. I'm in my cell if anyone needs me, which I have a link to in the description of this video. Bye!